ahead and open up with that, right? You'll explain it. Do you want me to just open us up and then you go
Still
ahead?
open, yeah. Hold on, I didn't record.
Who's opening? You're gonna open it? Oh, me. We got to give it a few moments, yeah.
Yeah.
Season 2, episode 1. I'm not sure if I'm waiting for it to pop up.
I see us.
How come I don't see us? Oh, there we go. All right. Yeah, I do see us now. All right. Ready?
Yeah.
Great morning, great evening, great afternoon, depending where you're at on this beautiful planet or this amazing universe. Welcome to Brown and Spiritual AF Season 2, Episode 1. Right? Holy smokers, Miss Isela GARCIA. Today we're going to bring up, I think it's a topic of shadows,
Yeah.
right? And what
Shadows.
that kind of is. I know people hear the word shadow, hear the term shadow. I have this friend, right? She's like, I don't know if I want to face those. That sounds kind of scary because they think of like demons and like scary
Oh,
monsters and
yeah.
stuff of that nature. When I ask people if they know what shadow work is, they that's where they tend to be guided to, right? So what is exactly in our tent for today for our topic in the quarters that we're heading for to? What can you explain to us a little bit more about what shadow is, Missy Sella?
Yeah. And I think, you and I have had this conversation where I think there's so many different perspectives about shadows, right? I think, and what you just mentioned right now about, and what I felt like when you were talking about it was lurking in the shadows. And I hadn't even thought about like it being creepy or scary. But the way that I describe shadow is it's the parts of us, and I'm going to give you an actual definition, but it's the parts of us that sort of creeps up or casts a shadow on the the experiences that we are inherently, it's like all of those divine experiences. It's love and happiness and joy and all the things that we are really entitled to experience in this lifetime. And these little shadows are the parts of ourselves that cast sort of this, I don't want to use the term darkness, but they make it difficult for us to completely and fully embrace the truth of who we are and those experiences of our divine experiences of joy, love, and even connection to others in relationships. Now, the definition, and I'm looking at Debbie Ford's work. She and Deepak
Love her.
Chopra. I'm sorry, say that again.
I love her.
Yeah, she and a bunch of folks really. There's actually a movie, a film that they made about this. It's like a documentary of shadow work. And I'm just going to read a little bit about what she says about it. It says, our shadow is made up of all the parts of ourselves that we hide, deny, suppress, and don't see in ourselves, both the positive and the negative. Our shadow is all the aspects that we reject out of shame, fear, or disapproval. It is made up of any part of ourselves that we believe is unacceptable and that will be met by the disapproval of others, or that annoys, horrifies, or disgusts us about other people or about ourselves. And then Swiss psychologist C.G. Jung said, our shadow is the person we would rather not be.
Ooh, you gave me tingles when you said that. The person we'd
I
rather not
know.
be. Oh, that's really in depth, right? Like there's so many different avenues that you can go with this definition, right? And what's really interesting to me is that you said you brought up joy, right? So not only is a person we'd rather not be, there's also a side of somebody we would like to be. So, like, let's say, for instance, if I find a characteristic in somebody that I really enjoy, right, that brings me a great feeling, is that possible that that's a different type of shadow that's with inside me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And for me, this has been a journey of unpacking. And we talked about this, I think probably our first episode. We talked about all of the ways that our early experiences of life, our lived experiences, impacted us. And I think in a lot of ways, it created these shadows, these parts of ourselves that we hid, or that we somehow got the message that it wasn't acceptable. And so we started to be what other people expected of us. And for some grown-ups, some adults, yeah, I work with children, so I use the term grown-ups a lot. For some of us adults, we still are in that space of not being able to step in to our truth, not because we don't want to per se, but we don't know how. What are your thoughts about that, Mark?
Man, there's there's so many, right? There's so many thoughts and so many things. We're really truly stepping into your power, right? But we just don't know how. Right. When I think about this and I look at my life today as an adult, right? Who knows what the fuck I am sometimes. But what this brings up for me is work environment, right? And you go back to the being that person that you don't want to be, right? So for a long time, I've been in the hospitality industry for 20 plus years, believe it or not, right? And there's some things that bugged the fuck out of me about it, right? Like I love people, don't get me wrong. I really enjoy that part, right? But also those same people that I love bring out parts of me. I always want to like choke the shit out of them.
Right.
Right. And there was a
Yeah.
while back where I was falling out of love with what I was doing, right? It just wasn't bringing me joy. It wasn't bringing me excitement, right? Like all that amazingness got sucked out of me. And for a long time, I put that blame on my surroundings, right? I put that blame on my guest, right? Being needy as fuck. Well, I'm in the hospitality industry. People will come to get waited on, to get service, right? To create an experience for them. Two, right? My coworkers, right? Like they're slow as fuck, or they just not trained properly, right? Maybe somebody's leading you that is not qualified to lead you, right? And trying to boss me around, right? And when I looked at this, it looked like from the outside, all this was happening to me.
Right.
And I would want to blame everybody like, well, if you didn't talk to me like that, or if you didn't do this, I got shitty tips because people just don't tip well because whatever reason, right? When then I came across Debbie Ford's work, I realized, holy smokes, wait a minute. The only reason why I heard this term, and I don't even know where I heard it or what, but it was in my, it was along the quest of my search for why am I feeling this way, right? Like, why am I always angry and pissed off? Like I used to love this. Why do I hate it now? Right? Like relationships, right? Like they start all great and awesome sauce, right? Because you bring your best foot forward and they start revealing who they really are, not realizing that my job was holding the mirror up to me, right? I was bossy as fuck, right? So when somebody was bossing me around, that's when it started triggering me. That's a good term. People listen, remind this, you're gonna hear the word trigger, right? Because if you are triggered by something, it's typically somebody holding up a mirror to you and you're seeing those parts of the people that you don't want to be that's inside of you, right? Is that kind of along the lines of what you're talking about, right? Yep. Becoming that person you don't want to see. So when I start seeing my guests like be shitty, right? I started to realize, wait a minute, am I showing up as the best version of myself today? Like, what am I emitting that they're mirroring back to me? And why am I getting pissed off? So this term I was talking about is if you're easily triggered, that means you're easily manipulated. Now let that sink in for a while, people. If you're easily triggered, so let's just say if I come in and I piss you off, right? Let's just say you're listening to this and it pisses you off and your blood is boiling, you're being manipulated right now. Why? Because you let an outside force, right, dictate whether you're happy, sad, or angry. And when I realized that what was happening, I was able to turn my work into a training ground, right? Because where else can you go right? Well, school, right? Church, right? With your fucking family at Thanksgiving dinner, right? But work was an ultimate place, especially in the hospitality industry, to be able to see all your triggers being brought up at any part of the day, all damn day, right? So that's what it's been. And just because I've been on this work and this path and I've really tapped into this, even to this day, work, when I go punch a fucking clock for somebody, I still get triggered big time, right?
Mm.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. Let's just say lack of structure in the fucking workplace, right? No system, right? Lack of training. Remember we talked about motherfuckers bossing you around that don't know shit? It's not their fault. It's just the system fucking sucks, right? And people are going to get pissed off about this, but it's true and you see it everywhere, right? There's not a shortage of great workers, right? The children of today are not sucky. They're just not trained properly. We don't know how to talk to them. So when I go to work and I think to myself, wow, I put myself here, and I look and I get triggered, I got to think to myself, okay, Mark, where is the lack of structure in my day, right? What system do I not have implemented yet? And how do I show up consistently for myself? So all it is a reflection being pointed back to me, right? And I don't know if that makes sense to people, but that's what's been going on in my head.
Yeah, I've never done what you do.
Uh-huh.
I don't know that I could do what you do. I mean, I work with kids. Historically, I've worked with kids, families in crisis situations. So I was in crisis intervention. Now I'm a consultant. And so been a consultant for several years in education, but I specialize in trauma. I specialize in working with, challenging situations. And I can imagine that there's a lot of overlap in the work that we do because we work with people. I can also imagine, and again, this is just me imagining, kind of stepping into your shoes a little bit. I can imagine that every day brings different people with different personalities and temperaments and expectations, and that you have to, and I think this is true of all servers, I think it's one of the hardest things to do because you're not really, I think in some cases you establish relationships with customers who return. But I think that at any given moment, you have to be able to adjust and adapt based on what that individual is bringing. And that requires, I think, to be a good server. Because we went to Dunkin' Donuts yesterday. I was going through the drive-through to get a coffee. And I did my order and I don't know if anybody knows anything about coffee, but I'm a big coffee drinker. So I know, like, at Starbucks, it sounds like this. Hi, welcome to Starbucks. What can I get started for you? At Dutch Bros, we're about to talk about our entire life.
Oh, yes. I'm glad you brought this shit up. For real. Watch, it's going to tie in perfect. Go ahead. Watch.
And then when I go to BR, we're having this lovely conversation while the music's blasting and, they're singing in the background. And then I go to Dunkin' Donuts and I love the coffee. Okay. I love the coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, but she's like, yeah, what do you want? I was like, okay, so I'm going to do, because I do a large iced coffee with no sugar in it, just cream. And then she says, and she didn't have, I said extra cream, and she didn't put that on the thing. And I said, don't you normally put 2? She goes, oh, yeah, okay. She changed it. And so then she goes, okay, come up. And so I go up, and it's just such a different experience, right? And so my daughter is with me, and I said to her as she handed me the coffee, or after we were done, I said, yeah, she didn't sound like she was liking her job too much. And she was like, she doesn't even look like, sound like at all like she is happy to be here today. And it makes a difference. It makes a difference to me as a customer. I just got a car recently, and I have a Mini Cooper. And so I stopped at the mini dealership just out of, let's go see what's available, because nothing's available these days. And there happened to be the exact car that I built out sitting in the showroom. And the guy was there one day. He was like, or no, he was 3 days in. So he was like not pushing a sale. We were just having a conversation. I felt like comfortable, and it was a lovely experience. So I come home and I tell my husband, you know what? I really liked him. I'm going to go back and buy the car from him. So I bought this car from him because I liked him. customer service makes a difference to me
big,
anyway.
big
And
time.
so, but it really requires, and we dismiss it like, oh, it's, oh, anyone can do this job. Bullshit. Not anyone can do this job well. But the skill set to be able to adapt and adjust and meet individual needs in 3 minutes is really, I think, a skill. It's a high level skill to do it well.
Yes, you gave me tingles when you said that, right? Because this is a skill that can be taught, right? I wasn't the greatest. So let's go back to that Dunkin' Donuts, right? Let's go back to that Starbucks, right? Let's go back to that Dutch Bros, right? It's about the experience, right? So when I go to a place and I get shitty service, which is almost everywhere in the world now, right? Which is almost, key word, almost, guys, right? Because when you go to Dutch Bros, it's not like that. When you go to Starbucks, it's not like that. You go to Dunkin' Donuts, yes, because their system's fucked up. It's not the employees, it's the system. So keep that in mind, people. It's the system. Now, if you don't have a system for yourself, this is what that looked like for me going to Dunkin' Donuts. What could I get you? This motherfucker just like, what the fuck are you doing here? Right? It's going in my mind, right?
Right.
You're not doing that properly. The inner critic, right? That shadow aspect of me is being triggered by this shitty customer service because I know I give great customer service. Well, I thought I did, right? So there was a lot to learn from going to restaurants and getting shitty service because if I'm being triggered by that shit, I'm only able to recognize it because it's inside me somewhere. Damn, do I give attitude off sometimes? Right? Am I that person sometimes? Do I leave my shit at the door when I walk in? I wasn't doing that. Right. But when I found this word and I started looking at that and I started playing the game to where I let people trigger me so then I could figure out why are they triggering me? It created a total different realm and a total different experience for me. Right. And I started realizing, holy shit, nobody taught me this system. Right. I had to figure it out on my own. Right. And when you think about these places like Dunkin' Donuts versus what do we call it? Dutch Bros.
Dutch Bros.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, keep in mind, okay, remember I talked about the children, the youngsters coming in, the new age, right? Remember when we
The
talked
Gen
about
Z.
how we
Gen,
wanted, yeah,
yeah.
remember we want to complain about these mother lovers, right? So this might be the shadow of the owner saying, we can't find nobody wants to work and blah, 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 whatever the fuck, right? But wait a minute. And they want to blame the age range, right? But when you go to Dunkin' Donuts and then you go to Dutch Bros, the age range is basically the same, right? So you telling me Dutch Bros just happen to get lucky all those times and Dunkin' doesn't? No, right? I go to Dunkin' for the experience of the coffee, not the service. Oh, no, yeah, Dunkin'. See, I go to Dutch Bros for all that shit. I go to Starbucks for all that shit because it's an experience. Right. So when I noticed in the customer service that I was being triggered by something, that's what led me to start doing the inner work and realizing, wait a minute, I'm only being manipulated by the shitty customer service because something inside of me is not figured out properly. Right.
Right.
So I'm glad you
I
brought
think,
up that Dunkin' stuff.
yeah, I talk a lot about when I do my in-person trainings in education. I talk a lot about the not only the customer service side of things, but how it lands on someone, how somebody receives that, are different forms of communication. But as you were talking, where shadow work has been significant for me, because I really believe that all of the shadows that we are willing to take a look at and understand really stem from our very early experiences of life. And we, in our interactions with others, it provides the opportunity for us to really unwrap that, to understand it, because as you said, we get triggered. And one of the things, or what I was thinking about, was my relationship with my husband. Because as a child, I did get love and affection from one side of my family, but I didn't get it from my mom, who was my primary caregiver, basically. She had full custody of us. And so I didn't feel safe, I didn't feel connected, and I didn't feel a lot of affection. So fast forward many years, And what do I want from my husband? I want affection. I want him to, adore me, to do for me, to drop everything for me. It's like I wanted all of these things that I felt was missing within me. And I realized, and I can't even pinpoint where in our relationship that I realized, number one, what I was asking for were the things that I felt like I never had, I didn't get. And so I was asking him to fulfill that void within me that came from childhood. The second thing that was really a huge aha moment, and I don't think they happened like at the same time, I think time went on, was that at one point I sat back and I was like, well, fuck, am I doing that? Like when I say to him, I want you to be more affectionate. Now let me just kind of preface this a little bit, because when I was young, I was raised to be very strong, very independent. I don't need a man. We go out to dinner. I'm going to pay my way. You pay your way. I don't need you to pay for me. So that was my whole mentality, right? So we get married. I'm independent. I don't need you to take care of me. I don't need any blah, blah, blah. Leave me alone. I'm going to do my own thing. My husband was like, cool. I'm going to go play basketball. I'm going to do my thing. We do things together. We have separate lives. It was great. And then I want him to do more for me. And then I'm like, but I need you to take care of me. But I need you to like love me and show affection. And he was like, what the hell? We never did that before. He's like, so he's confused. And there was that moment where I'm like, all the things that I'm asking of him, do I do any of that? Do I show affection willingly? Do I lean in and, hug him out of nowhere? Do I do any of those things? Do I do things extra for him? And I think a lot of women, we do stuff like clean the house and then we get irritated because, the husband throws the garbage and he's like, I threw the trash. I'm like, okay, you threw the trash. Like you don't get a cookie or a cookie or a star for that. You threw the trash. But I think that there were so many things that I realized I was asking, but I wasn't giving. And it was really with the intent to fill a void that I was feeling. That was a huge aha moment for me. And it's one of the things that I have to work on. Like I consistently have to work on, because it's easy for me to move back into an old pattern of behavior where I just do what I need to do. And then I go, oh, wait, you haven't shown me affection. And it's like, wait, Isela, have you shown any affection? So it's kind of what you're saying about, when you're triggered by something and you're like, oh, I'm noticing it. Am I doing that? Do I do that? Or how do I respond to those situations? Is exactly this in my relationship.
Definitely, right? Because it basically is, shadow work is relationship, right? It's the relationship within that you have within yourself, and then how that projects out, right? That's another word, projection, right? A lot of the times we project our shadows onto other people for scarcity reasons, right? Out of fear, right? Are we coming from a loving part of our personality or a fearful based, right? So when you were talking, you start thinking about like times when you were younger and growing up, right? Let's get back to this structured thing for me, right? My dad and my mom was strict as fuck, right? Like we could only go so far enough that we could hear her whistle. Now, my mom could whistle pretty damn good, right? My mom and dad could whistle pretty good, right? And so if we were out playing, right, we had our friends trained, because if we didn't hear it, they had to hear it, right? Because if my mom whistled and we weren't back within like a 5-minute window, we were getting fucked up, right? Beat, right? Spanked, right? And I think my mom really enjoyed it growing up, right? Because that was like that fear-based, like, you know what I mean? You're not going to be a bad kid because I'm going to beat it out of you, right? Type of mentality. And that shit, well, we talked about this. I'm here, and it seemed to have worked, but it didn't, because it fucked me up, right? And I had to work with some of that stuff. So, and then my dad too. My dad had a different type of structure. He gave us more leeway, and he didn't have to whistle. We didn't have to be back in 5. My dad didn't give a fuck where we were at, right? However, we had a schedule of how to pull weeds, when to pull weeds, when to clean the yard. Like he kept us in that kind of line. We were like little slave workers, right? And no wonder why kids grow up and they know how to use a rake and they know how to use a hoe, and not a garden tool hoe, right? My dad told me how to use those other hoes too, but this one we're talking utensils in the garden, okay? But anyhow, when I thought that I didn't want structure, right? And I try to get away from that, right? So when people started telling me to do things and I didn't like it, I hated it, which is kind of funny now because structure I enjoy when it comes to certain things, right? The same things that I didn't like my dad for, the same things that my mom annoyed the fuck out of me for, is what annoys me now in some of the companies that I work with, right?
The lack of structure, are you
Lack of
referring to the
structure,
lack of
yes.
structure?
The lack of structure, it triggers me to this day, right? And it's so funny that back then it triggered me because I had too much structure. Here,
Right.
there's no fucking system or no structure, right? People, it's kind of just like a free for all, right? And I'm just thinking to myself, like, holy smokes, it kind of goes full circle, right? It kind of goes full circle. Because when I was younger, I looked at structure as a form of imprisonment, right?
Mhm.
My parents were instilling some really cool things into me that I didn't realize at the time, but I hated it being a child, right? Nobody likes to be in chains, right? But now I go to work and I'm imprisoned by different types of chains, right? There's certain times where structure comes in handy. Like black people like to say, be in the moment, right? And I get being in the moment. I get when you want to just go with the flow, and that's really cool. But in business, right, in customer service, there's a way to go about things. And if it's structured, I have a system that I work with, right? I'm one of the greatest at what I do. And people love working with me because I have a system, right? And the restaurant business is a team effort, right? And your
Right.
guests are part of the team. And you got to be able to create that experience so then they make the whole experience better. But that's not always the case sometimes, right? So when I start thinking about that and look at the systems that I've built for myself that allows me to go into work and stay cool, calm, and collected because I'm recognizing my shadows when they're popping up in front of me, right? And I have to ask myself, like you ask yourself, shit, am I doing that? Am I not doing that? Am I being the best freaking teammate I could possibly be right now? Or am I being a douchebag? Right. So that's what that's a really interesting take on that whole structure thing over here. And then the lack of structure. Right. And then
Right.
once again, it just points towards me. Am I where I want to be right now? Right. Am I doing the things that are pushing me forward, right? Pulling me forward. That's a better term. Am I doing the things that are fueling my soul inside and pulling me more towards my goals? And I think that's why I get annoyed with the lack of systems and structure in a 9 to 5, right? Because I think in somewhere inside of me in my life, I'm not where I want to be because I'm not being totally structured and level headed and focused for myself.
That's, it's really fascinating because you bring up a couple things. I think there are a lot of things within systems when we look at how systems are developed and created. And systems, I could go into hard systems and soft systems, and soft systems are really about the relationships that we form in order, the interdependency. And I think that the interdependency is just as significant in your work as it is in the work that I have done for many years, because we are interdependent of one another. For you, it's like the cooks need to make sure whoever's like pushing food out that they're doing so in a timely manner, that there's communication, that like it's like everyone's is like a cog in a wheel, and it really has to come together. And when there isn't communication and responsivity, and I think even respect on how we do that, then I mean, it makes for a difficult situation. And I think the same is in my work. I think that part of the issue, and this goes into the leadership training that I have done for many years, is that number one, most of us do not know how to be effective communicators. I think that is a shadow. I think a lot of us, we pretend like we know how to be grown-ups, responsible grown-ups who know how to communicate. And I mean, I don't know how many times I have interviewed folks that sound great on paper or are able to articulate well in that moment, but when we get them actually working, like the ability to be able to communicate effectively, say what you want to say in a way that's respectful, not hold grudges, not manipulate the situation, not take it personal. And now, because what happens is your drama and your inability to be able to effectively communicate with those of us who are working with you, that's the breakdown. But part of the leadership system or structure is that we have to actually teach people how to do that. We make assumptions that folks know how to do all those things I just mentioned. We make assumptions that because you are an adult, you know how to work through conflict. You know how to not take it personal. You know how to be kind, even in a difficult situation where you do have to address some, some things that are not so great to mention, but it needs to be brought to the table. Like those are things we make assumptions about. And when we really go back to the topic that we have at hand, so many of our shadows are in a lot, like are there creeping along. And for many grown-ups, we don't take the time, and because we're in fields where, yeah, we walk in with this, years of experience in terms of our spiritual work and development, but the folks we're working with may not have had the same experiences as us. That's a high likelihood. So we come in with this lens, and other folks are like, what the fuck? I don't give a shit. I just need this taken care of, or you didn't listen to me, and we're placing blame. And again, those shadows start to come out, and we're unconscious of it. We're unaware of it, or they're unaware of it. We're unaware of it. And then the system breaks down because, number one, we didn't provide the necessary training or support. We don't acknowledge that we all have different lived experiences, the way we communicate, our cultural differences, even our work, our past prior experiences. We don't create a climate and a culture of how we relate to one another, how we communicate with one another. Again, assumptions are made. They're adults. They can figure it out, which is one of the biggest lies ever. It's bullshit. I don't know. My work as a consultant, I get a lot of work because I'm dealing with adult bullshit, interpersonal, I'm not kidding, interpersonal
I believe
issues.
you. Yeah.
Like not being able to communicate effectively with one another. And the biggest thing ever is I'm unwilling to forgive. I'm unwilling to forgive because of what happened last week. But that's bullshit. It's not what happened last week. It's what happened to you when you were 3 years old. It's the way your father treated you. It's the thing that happened at your first workplace, your first employment experience. And this in front of you is simply a reminder of all of those things that are left unhealed. So we're not just dealing with what people are showing up with. We're dealing with all of the shadows that they bring along with them. And we make assumptions about, again, they're grown-ups. They should be able to have these conversations. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. We need to start unpacking this stuff.
Big time, right? I totally get it. Because now that I got a different lens, now that I'm able to see, right, why things are the way they are, right? It's like, wait a minute. It's like, I say this quite a bit. Like, why would I buy a fucking Ferrari from somebody that's driving a Pinto, right? A Ford? Would I take personal training sessions from somebody that doesn't look like they take their self-care personal, right? Like, would I do business with somebody that I look at and could say, wait a minute, you're my ass on health issues, right? And the communication through this, that I see, right? I look at how I used to. Now, there's a difference between, I had to learn this. I didn't know. I was young. I was 21. I went from hosting to managing, right? And nobody taught me the in-between. Mm-hmm. What I learned was you just tell people what to do and that's it. Right. My way.
Or you bring in your old childhood ways.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I started ruling with the iron fist like my mom did. Right. And I was young. And so a lot of the people that I was trying to boss around, right? Because I thought, yeah, I'm the fucking boss. Right. A lot of people are trying to boss around. We're like in their 40s. Right. In their 40s and their 30s. And they've been in this game for a long time. And here I am, a fucking host. And now I'm telling people what to do. And the people that brought me up just said, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we do it. And whatever the fuck. So I ruled with iron fist. I didn't give a fuck. It's like, hey, you didn't come in. You look kind of raggedy. You didn't iron your shit. You're supposed to be on stage today. Go to the bathroom. There's an iron in there and go get some makeup. If you don't have any, borrow some from one of the other girls. Right. Oh, you're not doing that properly. Right. Instead of showing them how to do it, I was telling them how to do it. But then I thought to myself, Mark, do you even know how to do this shit? Right. I can't be telling people how to do stuff. Right. And there's the difference between telling and then showing, right? Through lead by example. Right. So like that's another thing that came in. I started in this industry, right? Because I had a lot of issues with kids that were their parents owned the fucking business, right? I've been in that fucking situation so much in my life. So when I had this guy coming in to try to tell me how to do my job when I'm on the fucking floor, I understand this restaurant, right? But you're going to come and try to tell me how you want things to be because you got a fucking degree, right? Wait a minute. Your degree shows you numbers. I'm showing you how to interact with people. And that shit would bug me. Right. And I started realizing, holy smokes. Okay, Mark, you might have to change the way you do things a little bit. Right. So let's fast forward to now. Well, let me tell you, I don't fucking manage. Right. But for a long time, I worked really, really, really hard because that's what I was taught. Right. And if I worked really, really hard, I would get rewarded by praise. Right. No, I didn't get rewarded with praise. I got rewarded with more work while other motherfuckers, right, could do less and wouldn't really be in trouble because why? That's what they expected from them. But I had to go above and fucking beyond, right? Bed back then works and beyond. Like, and that was part of me, right? That was something I wasn't willing to let go because to me, hard work equaled payoff later. I didn't want to let my family down. Mark, you're a hard worker and it's what you're doing. And it took a long time for me to face that shadow and say, wait a minute, hold on. Why am I doing this so hard? Why am I running ragged? Right? When all that happens is more gets piled onto my plate. And I thought because more was getting piled onto my plate that these people loved me because they entrusted me. Right? No, I was just being used. Right? Part of my shadow that I didn't want to face was like, Mark, you love yourself. And if you loved yourself, you wouldn't be allowing yourself to have anxiety. You wouldn't be allowing yourself to go home and drink a half bottle of fucking vodka every night with a 12 pack of beer. You wouldn't be out there sleeping around with a whole bunch of random women all the time, right? Because these are all shadow aspects that come up due to one environment, but lined back all the way to our childhood.
Yep.
Right.
So I want to lean into that a little bit because I think that's true for a lot of us. You said hard work was how I got approval and acceptance in love. And so I think a lot of us got that message as children that you had to, number one, you have to work really hard. And because of the inequities in the world, many of us, people of color, have to work harder and we don't even realize it because it's just part of the system, right? So we have to work really hard. And if you don't accomplish great things, that's your fault because you didn't work hard enough. Okay, so that's part of the system. I think when we do start, and you know, I have my doctorate. I was in school for 26 years.
Damn, Dr. Isela.
I know, right? 26 years of my life. That had nothing to do with me. That was me trying to reach a level of worthiness so that I could then get the final approval and the love and the affection that I was seeking from my mother. Look, I can accomplish, because one of the things she used to say to me is she goes, if you leave, because she used to threaten me. She actually gave me away a couple times. And so she used to threaten me that, you know, without her money, that I would not be able to accomplish anything. And when you're a kid, you don't know about financial aid. You don't know about those things until you get to the age that, you know, there's someone who can help you along the way. And so I was under this understanding that without her, I would be nothing. And she would say that my dad was nothing and that you want to be just like him. And so it was all fear-based, right? And so I kept working and working and working because I needed to prove to her, that was my mentality, I needed to prove to her that I wasn't nothing, that I could accomplish great things. But really, when you really look at it, it was I was seeking love and approval and affection. And I needed to know that I was worthy of those things from her. So there I was, 30 in my early 30s in a doctoral program, looking around, and I was running a crisis intervention program at the same time. And I'm looking around this room and everybody's almost twice my age. They're on the back end of their careers. This was like one of their final, you know, goals that they wanted to accomplish. And I remember thinking, what the fuck did I do to myself? And for a while, I was angry when I was in my program, because I was like, I put myself in this situation. I'm running a crisis intervention program. I'm losing my mind here. And it's like, but I didn't want to take out loans and not have anything to show for it. Like now I'm paying back school and not have a degree to show for it. So I stuck with it. And when I finished it, it was one of those things where I realized on the back end of that, not a damn thing changed in my life. Now, have opportunities open doors? Yes, absolutely. And people will say, oh, Dr. Garcia, oh yeah, that changed. But in terms of like my day to day, I still go to the grocery store and I still do all the things that I did the day before I got the degree, because, and that happens regardless of who you are. But I realized at that point that had nothing to do with my educational journey. I learned a lot. I know a lot. I implemented it. But the true reason why I worked so hard for so long was for that love and acceptance and approval.
Yep.
And so that was a huge shadow of mine, a huge. And I realized that, number one, I haven't had a relationship with my mom in 30 years. So it's not like we had a direct connection where I could even show it to her. But second, it doesn't even matter, because really what matters is my love for myself, my approval, my knowing that I'm worthy of those things that I was seeking outside myself for.
Yeah, you said two key things that really jumped out to me, because that you know what I mean? Like these intertwine, right? It's really cool to hear stories. Once again, people ask me this all the time. How long have you known Isela? Well, I've known her for 15 episodes. Which we're coming up on a year now, right?
Yeah.
But you said I put myself here,
Right.
And help.
Mm-hmm.
Right. When I look back and I see the positions that I'm in right now, and I look how far I've come, and I realize that I still don't get the recognition, right? Because this still irks me. This is a part of my shadow that I recognize, and I seen this in certain parts. Like, yeah, people will tell you what they want to tell you. You're amazing for them as long as you're able to help them with what you do,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you do, like man, I know what I'm great at, right? And for so long, I took what I was great and I helped make other people's shit greater.
Yeah.
Right. I had to learn to kind of not. I had to separate myself from this we shit. Right. Like the businesses that I work with. Oh, we have this, we have that, we do this. This is no. They have this, and this is what I help with. Right. Because that, remember, we were talking about, we do things because we want that praise. That's a part of shadow of me, as I do things and I go above and beyond because I want to be the best and the greatest. And I am. To me, in my mind, you can fucking see what I do. I guarantee you nobody in the place that I work at can do it the way I do. Now, I'm not saying that there's not other good people, right? But being good and being great are two different things, because there's a whole bunch of stuff on there. And I'm not being arrogant about this. This is because I love myself enough and I know my worth now.
Right.
Right. So when I hear people praise this, and here's another thing that triggers me, is toxic praise. Right. Part of shadow work I'm working on. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So when you come in and you tell somebody that they're so fucking great and at best they're mediocre, remember we're talking about people that are put in place versus qualified for the place, right? We just need a body to soak up. And I know that. How do I know that? Because I was a fucking slave one time. Right? I didn't know shit, but people put me in there and I had to figure it out. Right? I wasn't trained. I wasn't showed properly, but I was fortunate enough that I had this lady step up and she took me under her wing. Right? That's the help. She helped groom me. Right? She saw what I was about to go through. She knew I was about to be a fucking slave for a long time. Right? And she knew that I was doing things not the right way. And so she took me under her wing and she really taught me well. Miss Letty, I love you. If you ever come across this, right? And now that I see that now, and because I still struggle with this, right? I still struggle with this, and because I see it all the time, I'm just like, but once again, I tell myself, this is how I get my set in the zone. I know that I'm going into this place that has no structure, right? I know they have no fucking system whatsoever. The system is just like, I don't know, we'll just wing it, right? No pun intended, because it's a wing place. Um, and then I tell myself, this is what I had to tell myself. I choose to be here, right? I choose to be here, Mark. And what can you learn from this experience, right? You are here, you can feel these feelings, and how do you explore them, right? And then how do you tell the stories without bringing the others down, but simple for the fact of what I'm going through. So when I tell these stories, it's not to throw shade at other individuals, because they are aware to their level of awareness. They're at where they need to be at, perfectly fine for them. However, as a team, as growing, asking for help, that's as far as that goes, right? I go in, I do my job to 180%, not because I want that praise anymore, but because every day I step into this place, I get better as an individual. So when I go out into the world and I'm creating what I create, when I'm advising my teammates, when I'm with my clients, I'm a better person because of those scenarios that I learned to respond differently to. Right. And even though I still get triggered with this toxic praise shit, right, I could sit here and we could have this conversation and say, okay, what do I need to work on next? Right. So these triggers are actually really amazing. They're blessings from the universe saying, hey, Mark, there's still some shit that you need to work on. You ain't the greatest yet. You might be the greatest on the floor serving tables and making people laugh when you make fun of them. However, that inner work, there's still some spots that need to have a little light shed on them. And I could tell that because I get fucking angry. Yesterday I was angry, right? And I could look around and just see things that people can't see, or maybe people do see them, but their shadow allows them to overlook it. Why? Because they don't want to deal with their own shit and they don't like to hear the truth. And if I tell the truth, well, then no, it's me. I'm the one that's the rogue. I'm the one that's disgruntled. I'm the one that's not seeing clearly. It's like, no, motherfuckers, I see clear as day. You're just so blinded by whatever it is. And that's your level of awareness. And that's fine. That's cool. Right. But I know, once again, that this is stuff that's going on with inside me. It's not the outside world's fault. Right. It's something I have to be able to take responsibility for. Right.
Yeah, that's a big one. Actually, there's a couple things here. I think blame is something that a lot of us, again, it's a thing a lot of us grew up either hearing people do, place blame on someone else. It's somebody else's fault that my life is miserable. It's somebody else's fault that work sucks. It's somebody else's fault that I don't have the things that I would like to have in my life. It's somebody else's fault. So blame was very, very much a part of my experience. As a child, there were so many times that something would happen in the house and my mom would automatically blame me for it. And I wasn't even near it. Like, it wasn't even like she was like, what did you do? What did you do? That would come out of her mouth. What did you do? Did you do that? Were you over there? And so I'm very aware of how we engage when, we're in a reactive state, and whether blame is the first thing that comes out of my mouth, because it's something that I grew up with and it became a pattern for me. So I had to, become very aware of when I had the inclination to do that. I think what you said earlier about projection, like when I do have the inclination to blame, what's happening within me, right? Like, what is it that's reminding me of either something that I have not, that I'm not doing on a consistent basis, or something I have yet to heal. One of the things that you were talking about praise, because we do, and I mentioned this already, that we seek outside affection and attention and praise because it's an issue of our own worthiness. It's an issue of saying, hey, I'm being seen, I'm being recognized. That means I'm lovable. That means I'm worthy. And I get a lot of praise in the work that I do. I'm a very effective trainer and I'm a very effective leader. And I get a lot of accolades for that. And I will tell you that it is as addictive as anything else. That it's like another addiction. It's this addiction of validation. And I often talk about becoming a praise junkie, where you're like looking for your next hit. You know, tell me that I'm good enough. Tell me that I'm pretty. Tell me that I'm smart. Tell me that you learned something. Tell me that this somehow changed your life. And that's a shadow that a lot of people are unwilling to admit. And so it was one of the things that I had to be really aware of, because, you know, we get something negative and we'll hold on to that shit. But those positive things are just as impactful because we're filling up a void. So what I really had to work on, I think I've done this the last 15 years, is to really come from that space of neutrality. And what I mean by that is that when someone says to me, wow, what you said, what you did, or whatever was really impactful to me, I recognize that I am doing just what's the divine work that I have agreed to do. And even further, what I mean by that is I really believe that the work that I get to do, either in education or that I'm doing in my spiritual work, is really divinely guided. That what I have to offer isn't just Isela offering. It's that I've agreed to be the messenger, the channel, the one who offers, not the one, but a person who is willing to offer these experiences and, you know, say the things, listen the way that you needed, but that I don't take that credit. I mean, I recognize, and I don't need, I guess what I'm saying is I don't need the praise in order to see myself as a worthy, capable being. And I recognize that what I offer to you is divinely guided. It's not Isela being like the best, you know, medium or the best spiritual teacher. That's in partnership with what is beyond me. And so it's a weird space because I balance those two things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes sense to me, right? Because I think about that stuff because I used to love to be praised, right? I love that shit. When people say, hey, you're great at this, you're great at that, right? And I used to be like, no. Now I'm saying, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I worked really hard in order to get to this spot, right? Now, when I talk about toxic praise, also like back in the day, like my friends love that I'm very witty, right? I could come off the top of the head. And we've talked about this. Like you throw three darts at me, I'll throw 10 back, right? I already have 10 ready. Like I'm already building shit in my head for you, just what you might say, right? Now you might not, and you're lucky, right? But I used to love and thrive on that shit. And my friends would be like, wow, you're so great. It's so awesome. You really cut them down. And they enjoyed me cutting people down. But at some point in my life, remember when I was going to work and I was hating my life and I didn't like it, I was blaming everybody around me. Then I would always wonder why people were always attacking me and I always had to be a douchebag, right?
Mm-hmm.
I started not liking being a douchebag, but my friends loved it and they would praise me every time for it. And even though I didn't like being the douchebag, right? I didn't like really like being sarcastic in a negative way to people to hurt their feelings. My friends loved it. So I got high on that praise, even though I felt shitty for doing it, right? Yep. Them saying, wow, that was awesome. That was amazing, right?
It's addictive.
It is addictive. Yeah. And it trips me out now to see where I'm at now. Like, I'm not saying I'm not sarcastic still, but there's a time and place for it. There's not like, I don't do it to shoot you down. I do it in a playful manner that me and my guests are going back and forth and it's friendly, right? And but I think about that, it's like, holy smokes. I remember when here's another thing. People used to tell me I was great at things that I wasn't great at, right? But in order to keep me doing it or to keep me there or because I was the body, they made me believe that. Why? Because they'd rather have me there than nobody there. Right? Here's another toxic praise. And I would eat that shit up, even though I wouldn't do well. And somebody would tell me, you know, you're really not good at that, right? Thank you, people, for telling me that I wasn't really good at something, because those are the true mother lovers you want in your life, right? Not the ones that are going to hype you up when they know you ain't good. I don't want those kind of fucking friends. I want friends that be able to tell me, Mark, nope, you need some work in that area, right? Because that's how we're going to grow, right? So those are
that's manipulation. I mean,
exactly.
Really
yes, it is manipulation. It's like you're buttering somebody up, right? Like, you know, I learned this way because I used to sweet talk women, right? I'm going to call it that. Sweet talk them, right? You manipulate them. You make them believe they're better than they really were at certain things. Why? Just because you'd rather have one that night or none at all, right? And sometimes you just got to suck it up. right? And I'm not saying that because like I'm proud of that, but that's another shadow aspect, right? That I really had to deal with, right? Is all that shit that I've done that I feel ashamed of. Like all you ladies that are out there, once again, I am sorry. I apologize for my dickish ways, right? All those people out there that I sold horrible drugs to, and one of them was my friend, and I could have ruined your fucking life. I had to deal with that shadow work inside because I was ashamed of it for so long. And it would kill me, and I didn't realize it, right? That it was slowly killing me. But now that and these are all different aspects of the shadow people, right?
I have one more I want to bring up before we kind of start to wrap this up a little bit. And money was one of my big shadows. Ooh. And it is the one, and I know we've talked about this before, but it really is those messages that I got as a child. First off, we hear all these things like money doesn't grow on trees, what you think, we have money, we don't, it's like all of these beliefs about poverty, right? That we're poor and that we don't have money and money doesn't come easily. And then what happened is that I was raised to be extremely, and I'm going to use the word proud, like a pride, that I had pride in what I was able to accomplish and was unwilling to accept help from others because that would make me look weak.
Ooh.
Right?
Yes.
And so when somebody would say, hey, even something as simple as, oh, don't worry about it, I got the meal. We go to dinner together. Don't worry about it, I got the meal. And I'm like, no, it's okay. I'll pay for it. At least I'll pay my way. Even with my freaking husband, when we were dating, when we got together, it's like we split things. I'm like, nope. I don't need your help. I don't need you. I can do this on my own. And what I realized, fast forward many years, is number one, money is energy. And all those years that, first off, money had to do with my worthiness, because I got to a place in my own work that they were like, well, how much will it cost for you to come out and do blah, 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 blah. I'd be like, don't worry about it. It's okay. I'll do it for free. Because there's this weird thing where I'm going to pay my way and I'm going to give, because if I start to charge for what I'm worth, you're not going to want me anymore because you're going to realize that I'm not worth that much. So it was this very confusing relationship I had with money. And now going back to what I said, money is energy. And so when somebody says, hey, I'll take care of that cup of coffee, don't worry about it. It was like my throat would close in for me to say, oh, thank you. Thank you for that. Because it was so deeply entrenched in my belief system that if I accepted help, and that's the way I perceived it, that made me weak. But on the flip end of it, I couldn't say what I was worth when someone wanted to hire me. When I first started as a consultant, I would totally, like, other people were charging this much and I would bring it down just a little bit because I'm not that good. I'm not that worthy of that much money. And so that has been one of my biggest shadow healing work, was really claiming what I'm worth. And when I say how much I charge to come out and for me to do a keynote, people are like, and I'm like, that's what I'm worth. And I also am more willing now to receive the gift of a meal or a coffee or whatever that somebody is willing to pay for. When that was, like I said, my throat would close in and I thought I was going to pass the fuck out because I couldn't say thank you.
Yes, I'm glad you brought up that help, right? Since we're on the topic in the zone of how I work in restaurants, right? Asking for help. Somebody say, hey, do you need anything? No, I could be in the fucking weeds a long time ago and still wouldn't want help. Why? Because help meant that I probably couldn't do my job properly. Yeah. Which was the dumbest thing ever, because I probably would have been able to make more tips if I would have received that help sooner. Right. But asking for help was a sign of weakness. Yep. And I think that's the number one reason why the systems suck nowadays, right? The systems in a lot of these places, because it's not just the hospitality industry, it's almost global. You got these people that don't want to ask for help, right? They think because they ask for help, that it's going to be weak. How do I know that? Well, because I was in a similar position. Something so simple as asking, when a server asked me, hey, do you need some help? Well, the reason why, here's a shadow. Because if I asked somebody if they needed help and they told me, yeah, I'd be like, oh, you suck, you need my help, right? Because that's the era that I grew up in.
Right.
Not realizing how toxic that was, right? Remember being a bully, right? I remember being a manager, and if I had to help somebody, I'd be like, what, you can't keep up? Well, no, they can't keep up. They're one person trying to take care of 30, right?
Right.
You try getting set 4 tables at once with 4 people at it, and you want to come over here and be like, oh, you're struggling? Yeah, I'm one person, and you're telling me that I got to come, right? I gotta greet them. I gotta take the order. I gotta give them a fucking menu tour. I gotta go get their drinks. I gotta put their food order in. I gotta bring plates and chips and salsa and all this other crazy shit. And you want to say here, like, I was that douchebag? Like, yeah, I expected more out of them, right? But even though I expected more of them, I didn't train them properly, right? So that's why I look back to myself too, like, oh, asking for help is so critical, right? Especially when it comes around that money era, right? Because I'm having that issue too. It was like, what do I charge people? What is this? And I think to myself, like, when I get tipped, I'm just gonna enlighten some of you. And I'm not saying this to brag or whatnot, but I average about 35% tip average, right? That's 35%. A good server, 20%. Great server, 25, 30. But I average 35, almost getting that 40 point. Let's just put it this way. And this is crazy, right? The last few weeks, somebody has left me, let's just say their bill was $50, right? But because they asked me interesting questions and I gave them interesting answers, right? I got a $200 tip on a $50 tab.
That's amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I didn't say, no, I can't accept this, because back then I would have.
Right.
Said,
yeah, totally.
Thank you very much for that. Right? Another time, just like this is 2 weeks in a row. Another person said, here, you know what? I really enjoy, because you start talking to people and you start having this conversation. They want to know what you do, right? They don't want to know. They just know this is not all you do. This is just can't be. You're great at this, and you can tell you love to be here, right? Right? You're not that Dunkin' Donuts person. No offense, Dunkin' Donuts, right? You're more like the one that's over at Starbucks. You're more like the one that's over at Dutch Bros, right? And I could tell that. I could see it in you. Here you go. Whatever it is that you're working on, here you go. Here's $100 on a $50 check, right? Now, that wasn't the tip. The tip was 20 on the 50. The $100 was extra, right? They made sure they told me that, right? And I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying this because I know when you switch your inner world, when you start to face your shadows and you start to integrate that, you start emitting a different type of level of awareness, and people pick up on that because they're in tune. The same reason somebody could give you the creeps, somebody could give you the fuzzies, right? On the inside, right? In their heart, right? And you might give some people fuzzies in other areas and tingles, right? But that's a different story, right? But when I think about that, back in the day, I wouldn't have felt worthy enough to accept that. I would be like, no. It's okay. I'll take the 20. You keep that 100. I don't need it. Right.
Yeah. And a similar experience. Once I started to open up and I started to believe the value of what I had to offer, I started getting contracts that matched that offer. I'm going to share one thing, and then we'll go ahead and go to questions. So many years ago, and I would say probably 8 years ago by now, I have this dry erase board. I have in my living room, I have big dry erase boards because that's where I do a lot of my brainstorming. I do a lot of development work, so I create new things, new systems in early childhood education. And other work that I'm doing. But one of the things I put out on this board that I had to the left, I put out that I wanted a $5 million contract. I wanted full autonomy. I wanted the freedom to be as creative as I wanted to be, and to be able to bring on my own consultants without anyone overseeing me closely. So I wanted basically to create new systems and approaches with freedom, with creative freedom, which is really hard because a lot of people want very specific outcomes especially through grants. Well, I went into one of the agencies that I was already had a contract with. The deputy superintendents met me at the door and said, we have a job that we would like for you to take on for us. And so long story short, they literally, because it's just me, which means that when you're doing grant work, big agencies have grant writers. Isela does not have a grant writer. Isela is the grant writer. And so I don't have all this fiscal, like I don't have all this fiscal backing. So when you take on a multi-million-dollar grant, the other agencies have fiscal backings. And so they can pay out money before they get reimbursed for that, whatever it is that they're billing for. And so I don't win the grants. The big agencies do. And so they didn't want the big agencies to get the grant. So they found a way to pay me without having to go through the grant process. They literally handed me over a $5 million grant. They handed me a $5 million grant. I had full autonomy, I had full creativity, and I was able to bring in the consultants I wanted to work with. It was every single thing I had written down on my dry erase board that I had wanted. And it came right, like literally dropped in my lap. And I share that because we block ourselves from the abundance that is readily available to us. And we get stuck with what it might look like or who's going to be the one to offer these opportunities to us. We really just need to let it go, kind of put out whatever your heart is telling you that you want to do, and put it out there and let it go and allow the universe and vibrationally align with the belief system that it's possible and allow the universe to do its work. Because the more we can practice that, the more we'll see the incredible power that we have when we're in alignment. But see, those shadows, those beliefs that, oh, money doesn't grow on trees, you know, I'm tight for cash. What am I going to do next time? That energy that comes with that blocks us from receiving what could easily come to us if we just aligned vibrationally with abundance and manifesting that abundance.
Wow. 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 I'm so glad that you messaged me on Friday. Was it Friday? And you were like, hey, what do you think about talking about shadows? And I was like, perfect. Why? Because this shit has been weighing heavy on my heart for a while. Right. You know, and it's scary when you know that you're at a crossroads and what you've been working on, what you've been doing the inner work with, it is really waiting for you to let go of stuff. Right. It's waiting for you to be able to release some baggage in order for you to be able to keep climbing up the mountain or a whole new mountain. Right. So when you said that, I just knew that I had to get a lot of the stuff on my chest, off my chest. And I don't know how to come across it a lot of times. And for me to be able to share through this experience, people, because you're going through a live experience, you're going through a live coaching experience, you're going through a live shadow integration experience today. That's what this is. So Miss Isela, I would really love to thank you for bringing this to my once again, right? I asked the universe, I want to be able to release this. Help me release this stuff. But how are you going to do it? I don't know. Just put it out there. And then Isela was like, hey, let's talk about shadow work. It's like, oh, shit. And I love to bring you up-to-date information, people, that was really real life experiences that are going on past, present, and future. Right. So thank you for rocking with us. And Miss Donna's been in the chat room blowing it up today. I don't even know who that is. Is that somebody you know? Or do I know her?
Donna, maybe? Do you follow us, Tina and I, on Embracing Soul's Journey? I'm going to ask you that because we had a Donna recently, I think last Wednesday. So I'm wondering if this is the same Donna. What question do we have? Do we have a question?
Yes, she did ask. She asked, I've been striving to do shadow work, how to do it, and learn self-acceptance of self-love and self-love. I always have put others before my own things needing done for acceptance. I'm striving to heal. And she said, yes, that's me.
Okay. Yay. Well, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, so you have a couple things going on. You're talking about self-acceptance and self-love. You're talking about fear. And I think the biggest one, and we talked about this here today, is needing acceptance from others and putting others' needs before our own. Did you ever do that, Mark? Put others' needs before your own?
Always, forever, right? Like, why do you think I've always been the go-to guy in the restaurants and the businesses that I've worked in? Right? Because I always put other people's needs before. I was building, you know how many motherfuckers' dreams I built? Right? because I didn't love myself, right? I thought the love, if I helped them build their shit, that I was just gonna be like brought along. No, this is the dumbest shit I've ever done in my life. Now, I'm not saying it's not necessary sometimes, and I didn't learn a lot of valuable lessons, right? But it hurt more at the time. But now that I know, wait a minute, if I even put just half the amount of the work into me that I did for other people, shit, the tables would be turned. I'd create my own $5 million, right?
Right.
So yes, I've done that.
My question to you, Donna, because you're talking about um, doing things for the acceptance of others, so putting others' needs first. What happens, I think, sometimes is when we create these patterns of behavior with the people who we're either in relationship with, we work with, wherever that may be happening, it's that it becomes the expectation. Right? It becomes the expectation. And I think that's what you were talking about, Mark. You alluded to this, that when you worked really, really hard, then now everyone started to expect you to be at that level. Right? And so then when you start to change what I call the dance, when you start to change the dance, or you start to show up in your more authentic self, people are like, what are you doing? This isn't what you normally do. What do you mean, no?
Yes,
You
that's the first
always do this
sentence.
for me. Yeah. And so we're afraid sometimes of how others are going to respond to us if we start to establish boundaries. But what it comes down to, I think, more than anything, is being comfortable with how other people are going to experience that. I think that's what's really the scariest part of this, because we have come to this, I think, dependency of defining ourselves based on what other people think. And so releasing that, you can't make everyone happy. You can't make everyone happy at the same time. And starting to really focus in on what parts of yourself do you honor, do you respect, and do you love. And it comes in increments. You don't have to like go for all or nothing. It doesn't have to happen in 3 weeks. It's like, what part of myself am I willing to honor right now? When somebody says, hey Donna, can you take care of this? Or hey Donna, can you do this for me? And it doesn't feel right, honor that and say, you know what, right now isn't the best time for me. Check back with me in about 3 weeks. I might have some time then. Or, I'm not able to fit something like that into my daily schedule. I really wish I could help, but it's not something I can do. And we have to be comfortable with discomfort of other people's response to us setting boundaries. Okay? Because you will never, ever fill that void, ever, from the outside in. It's again, I talked about being like a praise junkie. It's like we get a little bit of approval, we get a little bit of acceptance, we get a little bit of love, and then all of a sudden we feel empty again. And then we have to go out and seek, that approval connection again and again and again. The work is an inside job. And so start with little things. Just start with little things.
Real little things, right?
Yeah.
And Donna, like let's, for instance, right, I was a workaholic. I went from working 6 days a week, right, and being that person that picked up everybody's shifts, right, for so long, and I would always be the yes man, right? When I started to not do that, people took it as a negative thing. Oh, you're being lazy. Oh, you're not a team player anymore. You're not this. Like, no. These are my healthy boundaries that I'm setting. And I have a life outside of this place. I'm not chained to this job. This is your dream. You figure this shit out. And once you start figuring it out for yourself and start treating yourself with respect, right? People don't like that. Why? Because you're not useful to them anymore. And even though I could still do 130% while I'm there, I had to find a nice way of doing it, right? So I cut back 6 days, 5 days. And I wrote this on my board like you did, Miss Isela. I want to work less than 20 hours a week or less than 30. I want to be able to make 6 days worth of pay in 3 days. And I figured it out. I work 3 days a week now. Right. And people get upset with that. They're like, how come Mark doesn't have to do this? Mark doesn't have to do that. How come he doesn't have? Well, because I know my worth. And I'm creating other things outside, right? I'm not just tied to just my job. I'm creating my own stuff. Like we're here right now. right? Look at this amazing, beautiful Sunday, and me and Isela are able to jump on in, right? And it started with small little steps at a time, right? Before you know it, it'd be 2 days and then one day, right? But I didn't just go for the gold all at once. I wanted to be done like working. But I think to myself, wow, if I stop being in this field of work, then my training ground gets smaller, right?
Hmm.
So that's how that kind of goes.
For me, because I was, and I think to some degree I am still um, a um, a workaholic, but for me it was a trauma response. And so for me, number one, again, wanting the approval, right? That happened for many years. And then it was a trauma response because if I kept myself busy enough, I didn't have to handle the shadows. I didn't have to deal with the shadows. Keep myself hyper busy. I don't have enough time to do the inside work. And then, but I work in crisis intervention, so I worked with families and children who were in experiencing extreme traumatic experiences. And so it kind of forced me into that healing work because it's a constant state of being triggered. You're seeing yourself in others and you're like, oh shit, that's me. And so I was kind of forced into, now I could have chosen not to, right? And a lot of folks do, but it was the opportunity for me to really start healing. And so now I get to do what I really love doing. And sometimes I get lost in it. I hyper focus. So I have to just be aware when I'm doing that because I tend to go all in. Some of us have that all or nothing mentality instead of that balanced state of experiences. Like, how do I balance my life so that I'm listening to my body, so that I'm connecting to my body, so that I'm connecting with, whatever you call God, spirit, your highest self. Like, how do you make sure that you're doing all of those things, right?
It's that ride or die mentality, right? We learned growing up. It's like you're with me or you're against me. There's no in between, right?
Yeah.
You're either on my side or you're not. You're in or you're out. You're hot or you're cold. There's no warm, right? Is Donna in this? You said you kind of know her, right? Is she in Arizona,
I don't
Donna?
believe so. She found us, if I'm remembering, she recently found us, like on Wednesday, maybe, or the Wednesday
Okay.
before. She just sort of landed on our page, and yeah, so she's very new to us.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Because I was gonna say, Donna, I hold a shadow integration class that I lead, and it's a 5 week course, and it's been going on for about a year, over a year now, and
Really?
yeah, I know, right? I started
Mhm.
it almost around the same time we did this. You see?
Wow.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. One of those things where I wanted to, like, one of the other things that I wanted in my life, right, was to create an extra $500 a month, right? Without punching a clock for somebody. And I was able to do that in a sense, right? And so, and one of the shadows is I don't talk to a lot of people about the things that I'm doing because I'm still working on, am I worthy enough, right? Who's
Yeah.
going to pay me to help them? But I think about it, I'm like, Mark, this is crazy. Why? Because look what you were able to do. You were able to create a 3-day work week. You were able to create opportunities where people like Miss Doctor Isela Garcia, right, reached out to you and said, hey, let's create together, right? You were able, you got people to show up to a class for a whole year straight and they paid you for it. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And for that, I even lowered the price, right? Because I wasn't feeling certain out. But now I'm getting better through these conversations and
Right.
through the questions of our beautiful guest, right? And through the life of Miss Isela and the things that she went through, I'm gaining that ability to get stronger and step more into my magnificence. So I'd like to thank you for that, Miss Isela.
You're welcome. And I mean, there's a reciprocity in every relationship. I think that we each, when we're open hearted, we can really connect with one another and gain insights from one another. And, I too have gained a lot from this experience. Even when Tina and I are online live doing readings, I was just thinking about this. and I think I shared this in another group. There were a couple people. I was a little off last Wednesday. Like there are some days where I'm like, I feel like I'm just spot on. I was tired. I spent some time. I'm an introvert, and I spent time with a friend for lunch, and it was just a lot of talking. It was a lot of talking for hours. So when I got to do my Wednesday live with my cousin, I was tired, and so I wasn't as spot on as I feel like I usually am. And it was interesting because there were a couple readings that were really like there was a reciprocity in that. And what I mean by that, like they showed up, like I showed up to offer them, but and without them knowing, they showed up for me too. You know, it was like they showed up and were helpful to me in that moment where I just felt tired and a little kind of off kilter. And I think that when we're open hearted and we show up for one another in that space of being open hearted, we recognize the reciprocity in the relationship, the giving and the receiving of just even these little moments. And I think in your work doing, you know, as a server, you're there with, and sometimes it's just, you know, an hour, but there's a reciprocity in that relationship and exchange of who we are. And, you know, I think so many of those experiences are divine, and we just dismiss them. You know, when we start to really pay attention, we recognize the importance that each person has in our lives, good or bad. You know, like
Yes.
I said, that projection, that, you know, noticing why is this showing up for me? And also, God, that really felt good. That was a good exchange there. So it's important for us to notice those things.
Yes. And if you guys haven't had or experienced Isela and her cousin on Wednesdays, it is really fun. It's exciting. You just don't know what's going to happen. I was actually brought on as a guest 2 weeks ago, right? And I was
Ah,
able, but here we go, right? That was one of those things where I had to work through a shadow moment, right? I was like, what can I bring to this table? This is not my realm. And I had to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and just play with it, right? Because that's
but
something.
it was great. It was
It
great
was
having you on.
and it was fun, right? I had to get out of my
Yeah.
head for a minute, right? And really get in that zone and let myself open up, because for whatever reason, I thought that I had to show up as somebody or something else, right?
Right.
But then once I opened up and I was just myself, it was just like, okay, right? So those are shadow moments, people. Like the
Yeah.
opportunities come up, right? The universe shows up for us, and sometimes we just dismiss that shit.
Yeah.
And these are just opportunities. Wow. So
Yeah.
I
And
really
you're welcome
recommend
back anytime.
it. I know. That was awesome.
All right, Mark, why don't you take us into a closing?
Well, thank you everybody for showing up. Season 2, Brown and Spiritual AF, shadow integration and whatnot. I am Mark Sanchez. You can find me on Instagram, Mark_my_magnificence. That's where I'm highly active for the moment. As we move forward, you will a little bit know about what I do, right? I do take private clients, and I do help train groups in shadow integration also. And I also am really great with energy healings. I just don't tell people that much as an opportunity to let the shadow really out, right? And Missy Sella, where can people find you, and what is it that you're super duper amazing at?
So my website, iselagarcia.com, is the best place to get all of my information. I have a downloadable PDF about, I think it's like 4 steps to finding peace in the midst of chaos. I am in the process right now of developing my own oracle cards that are really addressing trauma. So I am about, I would say, halfway through designing them. And then, so those will be available. And then I am developing a hybrid course that I will be offering more than likely at the turn of the new year. So right around January into February, an online course where you'll get to meet with me to have some intuitive support as you work through the healing process. And then there will be some online lessons that you will sort of go through yourself. And then I'm hoping to have some group collaborative conversations that we can support one another in this journey of healing. But my website, again, www.iselagarcia.com, is the best place to get all of my information. And I just updated my website. So I just added more. I added our flyer because we'll be on Brown and Spiritual AF recording every 2 weeks here live. So that flyer with those dates are available on the website. And then the link to our Wednesday mini readings with Tina is also there on my website. So be sure to visit that.
Once again, thank you guys very much for rocking with us, and we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. You guys have a great day.